Don't some people claim that Thomas was Jesus' twin?
Yes. So the word Didymus means twin. And in the New Testament canon,
Jesus had all right, keep going.
Jesus had a twin. Well, Jesus had brothers. We know that Jesus had brothers. And it's actually a point of contention because, like,
Rough, dude.
disputed.
Jesus,
yeah,
brother.
if you heard of
half brothers, right?
have you heard of the perpetual virginity of Mary?
No.
So there's a dispute whether, obviously, the Virgin Mary has a virgin birth of Jesus, but did she then remain a virgin? And Catholics say yes, she did.
Oh.
And a lot of Protestants say no, she didn't. And part of the reason for that is because Jesus is described as having brothers. Now, it could be that brother was just like a name that was given to them. It wasn't like a literal brother, or maybe they were other sons of Joseph or something like this. But the most natural interpretation to me is that he did actually just have brothers. Especially because for me, remember, I think that the birth narratives are invented. So I think the people who originally write the stories, they're not concerned with the virgin birth because they don't even know it exists. I don't think the virgin birth happened for many reasons. One of which is that, like, at one point in Mark's gospel, Jesus is performing an exorcism and his family come out. So his family come out and they say that they think he's lost his mind. They're like, what's he doing? Has he lost his mind? Because they don't understand. I'm like, if you've got this whole thing with like an angel coming down to you and telling you what's going to happen and you shall call him Emmanuel and you have a virgin miraculous birth and then and then later on, you just forget all of that and you're like, oh, what's he doing? Oh, he's lost his mind. You know? It doesn't seem to line up for me. So I don't think the virgin birth happened at all, of course. There's also some dispute over the translation. I mean, it says that there's an Old Testament prophecy that says a virgin shall conceive. The Hebrew word there is alma, which can just mean a young woman of marriageable age.
Right.
But again, Greek New Testament. So the Greek Septuagint translates the word as parthenos, which means virgin specifically.
Right.
So some people think that the New Testament authors were reading a Greek version. When the prophecy only said young woman, they read virgin, so they came up with the virgin. That's disputed as well. Who knows? But yeah, so Jesus has brothers. And Thomas isn't described as Jesus' brother, but he's called the twin. So even in the canonical literature, it's Thomas, also known as Didymus. And Thomas itself, the name Thomas means twin. It's like a development of an Aramaic word which means twin. I think like Tomar or something means twin. So in the Aramaic language, his name's Thomas, which means twin. But the Gospels take a lot of effort, like translating it into the Greek. Given that Thomas already is a word that means twin, that's where the name comes from. The New Testament authors write down Thomas, also called Didymus. So in the Greek language, Didymus means twin. So when the Greek authors are writing it, they're like, he was called Thomas, which means Didymus. So it's important to the Greek authors to tell the reader that his name, that he was called the twin. Right? That's important to them. So why? Why is he called the twin? Nobody knows. Some people think it could be a nickname because he looked like Jesus, and so they called him the twin. Some people think he might have been the twin brother of Jesus. Orthodox Christians will dispute that because that really puts a nail in the coffin for the virgin birth. Because if Jesus is born of a virgin and Thomas is his twin, then Thomas is also born of a virgin birth.
And then who's that
shit.
guy?
Right? However, there is an apocryphal, called the Acts of Thomas, which is another apocryphal gospel, which, again, not canon, probably completely ahistorical, but this is where Thomas travels to India. Because Thomas is traditionally the person who brings Christianity to India. And if you go to India today...
He goes there to trick them.
Yeah.
If you go to India today,
India, right?
you will find like really devout groups of Thomasites who really revere Thomas as an important guy because he's the guy that brings Christianity to India. And the Acts of Thomas is one book that recounts this, but at one point, I think they were at a wedding and somebody confuses Thomas for Jesus. They get them mixed up because they look so similar.
Well,
So that either yeah, all these Judeans look the same to me.
yeah. That was the word I was looking for.
They either mix them up because they are actually twins and that's why they look similar, or maybe they just happen to look similar and that's where he got the nickname. But for some reason, Thomas is called the twin. And so, again, in the Gospel of Thomas, it's Judas Didymus Thomas. So Judas is obviously some other name that he's somehow got attached to him. And then Didymus Thomas. So twin, which is a little bit weird. Some people are a bit speculative, a bit suspicious of the fact that it says that it words it like that. But I think twin could be a nickname. It could mean that he's his twin, whatever. But Thomas is allegedly the one who writes down all of these sayings of Jesus. And most scholars date this to the 2nd century. So it's probably not actually written by Thomas. Some scholars kind of think it's earlier, but that's a bit controversial. Again, Christians are going to watch this and they're going to be like, it's definitely late. Like, there's no way. It's ridiculous to suggest that it's early. But man, think what you want to think. It's got some weird stuff in there. And
how do you explain the miracles like water to wine and making a blind man see and all that stuff?
So Yeah, that's a bit weird. The water to wine only happens in John's Gospel. It's the first miracle that Jesus performs, and he doesn't want to at first. Mary, his mother, comes up to him and is like,
Get the party started.
she's like, we've run out of wine. And he says to her, woman, what has this got to do with me? Which sounds a bit clunky in the English. It sounds kind of rude, but it means something like saying like, like darling, or something. She's like, what's this got to do with me? Like, my time hasn't come yet. And she's basically like, please, Jesus, come on, we're out of wine. He's like, fine. So he goes and turns the water into wine. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we whether or not you think he performed miracles, especially healing and exorcism, it is like beyond the shadow of a doubt that he was known for doing that.
Mm-hmm.
He was known as a healer and
Brought Lazarus back
as
to
a miracle
life.
worker. Yeah. He was known well for doing that. I don't know about Lazarus in particular, because the raising of Lazarus only happens in John's Gospel. Also, by the way, one of my favorite indications that Jesus isn't God, because he prays before he raises Lazarus from the dead. He just before he raises Lazarus from the dead, he looks up to the sky and he says, Father, thank you for having heard me. And you know what he says? He says, I know that you always hear me, but right now I'm saying this for the benefit of everybody watching, so they will know that you have sent me.
That doesn't mean he's not God, right?
No, it
Yeah,
doesn't. It doesn't mean that he's not God. But what it means is that it implies. So a lot of people say that when Jesus performs miracles of his own authority, that shows that he's God. Because Old Testament prophets like Elijah and Elisha raised people from the dead, but they prayed to God first. They're like, God,
Right.
raised this person from the dead. But Jesus did it of his own accord. But Jesus, before he raises Lazarus, prays to God and doesn't just say like, oh, I'm praying to you first, but says, I know you always hear me, but right now I'm saying it for the sake of everybody else, implying that in instances where it seems like he's acting of his own accord, he is still praying to God. He's just not doing so publicly. Because he says in John's Gospel before he raises Lazarus, I know you always hear me, but I'm saying it right now so they'll know that you sent me, which is kind of interesting, right?
And that would jibe with the, I mean, you have sent me, not necessarily, but the yogi.
Yeah, so there's constantly like, Father has sent me.
Yogis perform miracles, is kind of.
Yeah, and so
you're a Hindu, dude.
It's not like
you don't know it.
It's not like Christians aren't aware that Jesus was constantly saying that the Father has sent him. They have their interpretation of that, but I think a lot of it lines up and converges on the idea that Jesus didn't claim to be God in this sense. Whether he performed those miracles is like kind of out of my purview. Like maybe miracles happen. I probably don't think they did, but he definitely had a reputation for doing something. Something extraordinary was going on with this guy who was walking around and doing stuff. And all of these traditions develop around him. People want to write about him, and then people start writing all of these gospels and stuff. But people have different ideas about what Jesus did. The Gospel of Thomas, which again I should clarify, is not canonical. Most Christians think it's like got no connection to history, but it says some weird stuff in there. Like at the very end, the last saying in the sayings Gospel of the Gospel of Thomas is the most famous, where one of his, I think it's Simon Peter, says to Jesus, Mary Magdalene should depart from us because she's a woman, and women can't inherit eternal life. They're not worthy of life. Now, from what you know of Jesus, what would you expect him to say? What are you talking about? Like,
Everybody's worthy of it.
What he says is, I will draw her to me to make her a man, so that she will inherit eternal life. For any woman who makes herself into a man will inherit eternal life.
Now, could that be a translation?
It could. So people say this. This is like the earliest indication of transgender, man into woman.
But is that like his way of communicating to a bunch of dudes that don't think women are that they should be, and he has to find a way to communicate?
So I've heard that the translation of the word man in that sense is like courage or like bravery.
That's what I'm assuming.
I think a lot of that is going on, especially because so much less work has been done on the thing about these Gnostic Gospels, like the Gospel of Thomas.
We're gonna get Wesley Huff in here, dude. We're gonna have Wesley Huff in here. He's gonna refute all this shit. Dude.
He will try. I've seen a lot of Wes's work. I like him. Seems like a really nice guy. I think he's made some blunders in various areas that are really important, and I've made as much known. There are some that I've spoken about and some that I haven't. I did a podcast yesterday where I spoke in detail about this massive blunder that Wes Huff made. I think it was like a year or so ago, which kind of brought someone I know into a bit of disrepute, unfortunately, and he just made this like really, really big blunder. But I don't like just like throwing stuff like that out there because it sounds like you're just sort of taking a jab or whatever. But
right.
I've always been happy to speak to Wes, and I think I wouldn't want to debate him because I think you'd lose a lot of the interesting bits because you'd be too like prideful and defensive because you're like, I'm going to defend my view. I'd love to have a conversation with him though. But yeah, I think he's made some mistakes.
But you are admitting on air that you would not debate Wesley Huff.
No, I mean I would.
I would. But you're saying the conversation might be more fruitful.
Yeah, it would be way better.